asked to talk a bit about how my experience in taking market design type issues or market shaping ideas and applying them in policy. But mainly I'm going to talk about innovation, because what we've heard so far is mainly about getting prices right, getting markets right when you already have products and you're trying to allocate them. And, you know, as a panel, we agreed that kind of there's a missing piece here of talking about innovation and how we design markets to stimulate innovation. So why is this important? Well, anything that we do at the moment involves carbon, and we need innovation in pretty much every area of our life to decarbonize our society. So, you know, how we heat our buildings, how we get transported, what we eat, all of it involves production of carbon. And so we need a massive amount of innovation to decarbonize all of these different sectors. And even if you got carbon markets working everywhere in the world and the right prices, that would provide some stimulation for the innovation that we need, but it wouldn't provide enough. Why not? Because we know from other areas that there is massive market failures in innovation, right? People have documented very high returns to innovation. Why is that? Because there's not enough, because of things like spillovers. You know, somebody figures out a better way to do a solar panel, very quickly all the other producers of solar panels are copying them, and therefore there's not enough incentive to be the person who does the R&D to do that. The other big market failure in innovation, of course, is that we reward innovation typically through patents, and patents produce their own market failures. In particular, what they lead to is innovation having a high price, at least in the short run, and low quantity. What do we need for climate? We need these innovations to get out as rapidly as possible. Right? So we really need to solve the access problem. I mean, it's terrible that we don't get drugs out fast enough, an issue I've worked on in the past, but we really need rapid adoption of technologies in the climate space. How do we typically spur innovation? What are the typical things that we normally do? Well, a lot of it is push, which is where we pay for inputs. We give grants to, you know, exciting ideas. We give grants to scientists to work on new ways of doing renewables or hydrogen, which is an area that I've been working on. But the alternative is pull, and economists have been quite excited about pull for a long time. What do I mean by pull? It means paying for outcomes rather than inputs. And there are a number of different ways of doing that. You could pay for results. So you can work with a specific firm and say, if you get more outcomes or, you know, achieve these objectives, we will pay you. You can do prizes, which are lump sum prizes for coming up with an innovation. Both of those have big problems with them. Prizes in particular don't do anything about getting the product out there, and often most of the prizes that have been done are actually just way too small, which is a different problem. People think, you know, you can give $1 million prize to solve a market that is billions of dollars. Like, it's just, we're just completely wrong orders of magnitude. But if you're going to give a big prize, you want to arguably tie it to getting the product out there and the product being something that people want to buy. And you can see where I'm going, which is a prize with those kind of characteristics is more like an advanced market commitment. What is an advanced market commitment, for people who don't know? It's where you commit in advance to pay a certain subsidy, which is tied to the quantity of that product that actually gets used or bought by other people. So you've got a market test in there, and you're tying it to quantity. In return for that initial subsidy, people commit to charge a lower price once the subsidy is over, and that helps solve the monopoly problem of a patent. Now, we have some experience of doing advanced market commitments, and that's, I was involved in the pneumococcal advanced market commitment, which was a commitment to buy a new form of pneumococcal that included the strains of the disease common in developing countries. It was a $1.5 billion commitment, but we haven't seen new AMCs since. And I think that climate is a really important place where we ought to be using this technique more. I went off and worked on development economics after the pneumococcal, but I and a number of people, including people in this room like Eric and Susan, got brought back into this problem during COVID. And I think because, oh, you've helped stimulate vaccines in the past, can you help us figure out how to stimulate COVID vaccines? And a lot of people came in to help solve these problems. And what's interesting, though, is the solution was completely different. It was not an advanced market commitment. That is not what we suggested. The reason is that for COVID vaccines, we needed to stimulate innovation. We wanted a very large number of people to be working on COVID vaccines because it was extremely urgent. And you wanted to pull in some really marginal candidates to keep working on it. And if you want to pull in the marginal candidate and you do an advanced market commitment, you have to set a very high price, right? A price that is high enough that will pull in the candidate that's got a very low probability of achieving success. And then you're going to pay that to even the one who's got quite a high probability, and that is going to waste quite a lot of money. So instead, what we suggested to, I was in the UK government at the time, others were lobbying the US government, and basically anybody who would listen, but those were the two who did the sensible policies. I don't want to say it was because of us, but was to build capacity, build more capacity to produce vaccines. Now, this is a digression into health, but the point is that the market design problem is really different for the different problem that you're facing, right? It depends on the market structure, it depends on the urgency, it depends on the probabilities of the different, potential solutions. But now there's a third example, which I've worked on, which is in the climate space, which is on permanent carbon removal. And we, heard a lot of the problems in the voluntary market. A lot of this is not additional, permanent, and also goes up in smoke. Like literally, a lot of the reforestation of those offsets has, burnt in the forest fires in California recently. So, actually probably made things worse. One answer is permanent carbon removal, extremely expensive at the moment, many different potential solutions. So this is an interesting example of where you really want to be technology agnostic, or you want to be at least flexible. So we worked with Frontier, who've got a $1 billion commitment to purchase permanent carbon removal. Problems in markets, like talk about this, there's nothing you can sell with permanent carbon removal. It's not renewable energy. Unless people want to buy it for their offsets. So they put out a commitment for, they're going to spend $1 billion on permanent carbon removal. Let's help sort of get more people out of the woodwork, knowing that there is somebody they could potentially sell to. But the problem there is you've got all these different technologies with very different prices and potentially very different cost curves over time. And they were really worried about the financial market failures because, are you going to really put $1 billion into a plant? And, how do you raise that on if you simply said you were going to buy permanent carbon removal in the future? So in the end, they did something that is, they have different prices for different firms. I think there's room to do something a bit more firm agnostic to complement that. those are some of the things that we worked on. We realized there was a massive demand out there and a massive need for this kind of market shaping work in climate. So last week we launched the Market Shaping Accelerator, which is a group at the University of Chicago, which is trying to be a clearinghouse for ideas on market shaping. We can't possibly respond to the demand that we're getting. I mean, I've spent the last week in DC talking to a large number of agencies who have ideas that they want to do pull commitments on. Every one of these markets is completely different. So you probably have to design a different system. So my main goal today is to get you excited and come see me afterwards, because I have real live things where there is money. Normally for advanced market commitments, it's about trying to raise the money. There's potentially money on the table for some of these things to do them to stimulate innovation. So come see me if you're interested. So what are some of the things that we're working on or thinking about? One is green concrete, which concrete is particularly problematic because not only do you need a lot of heat, and the source of, the heat is then going to require, carbon and the normal energy problem, but the actual chemical reaction needed to make concrete creates carbon. So there's a lot of potential opportunities, a lot of different potential technologies. Concrete, of course, is well known to IO economists as being not competitive. You've got all these local, monopolies or duopolies at the local level. You've got, problems of lack of competition even at the national level. And so, you have to think very carefully about how you put subsidies into that system, because you might end up with quite, surprising results. The second problem with green concrete is that you've got these incumbents have a lot of embedded capital. So, how to put incentives in the system that would be enough to move these big incumbents who have a lot of embedded capital, you got to persuade them. So one of the technologies that you could use that would reduce the carbon is, instead of using limestone, you would use a different rock and silicon carbonate, I think. Don't quote me on that. But you would need your factories producing cement to be next to a different kind of rock, right? So you've got billion-dollar factories and they need to be somewhere else. You're not going to do that unless you have a really long-term commitment for this. So again, how do we design that? The one thing we've been talking about, given that there's a big range of different possibilities of technologies, and you want people to use whatever is the most sensible technology locally, is just to have the government, who purchases, by the way, 50% of concrete in the US, right? So it's a very nice opportunity to work with the government to just fix how they purchase concrete. So can you embed, as it were, the social cost of carbon in their procurement decisions? And then you have a very flexible mechanism, and you basically introduce a carbon market without introducing a carbon market, right? Just through procurement rules. So that's something that we're looking into. Another issue is hydrogen. Hydrogen is potentially a very important future fuel. You would need a lot of green energy going into it to make it a good alternative, but it's nice, but you can store it, and people have said it might be a better solution to, batteries to store between seasons. And it's potentially a way to decarbonize things that are very difficult to decarbonize otherwise. The problem in the carbon market is you've got complementarities in innovation. So you've got to innovate on producing hydrogen, you've got to innovate on using hydrogen, And so the people who could potentially innovate to produce it don't want to do it because they don't know whether anybody's going to use it. Nobody's going to put in a lot of money into designing ways to use hydrogen if they don't know whether there's going to be hydrogen. The moment there's a big tax credit, you know, potential to do more. You know, I'm not an IO economist, so we really need to be working with IO economists who know this sort of thing better. I mean, I'm working with Chris Schneider. He's one of the co-directors of the Market Shaping Accelerator, but to figure out things about the lessons from this, you know, this isn't the first time we've had problems of complementary innovations. Heat-resistant crops is another area that we're working on. We need massive innovation on our crops because there are tipping points where suddenly the productivity of a crop crashes. We are starting to get that kind of innovation for crops in the US. The places that will be hit hardest by climate change are seeing very little innovation on that. And so you could see big parts of the world lose their ability to produce the food that they survive on. As I say, some of the issues are embedded capital, limited competition, and this need for very long-term certainty in a situation where governments aren't very good at providing long-term certainty, right? I mean, you put something in the rules or you put tax credits, it could easily be overturned. There are ways to solve that. As I say, this is mainly a plug to get involved. We have lots of live ideas that people would like solutions for, you know, contracts for difference. That's how they're doing hydrogen in the UK and Germany. Is that what the US should think about? So please come and see me if you have time to take on one of these challenges.